Hey, welcome back. And another new week is starting. This is Sunday as I'm recording this. And before we really get started, I just wanted to remind everybody and give everyone enough time to consider, feel in their body, feel in their heart about this new program offering that I've got coming up in mid-August. And I'll define the date probably at the beginning of August. I'm thinking mid-August. And it's really about giving you the opportunity to spend some time with me in a room and start to discover some of those wounds that you may be carrying. And it's a 4-week program, and we're going to look at the wound, the feeling behind the wound, how we can move that wound into a healing state, and how to give you practices to keep moving forward within that healing state and any other obstacles that you may bump into along the way, because it's not always a one and done, as we know, and it's always evolving, always evolving. So it will be a 4-week program. There's no coursework to do, no homework, no modules to watch. I do things very differently. I prefer to be in a room, a Zoom room, Google Meet room, whatever, with you and get to know you and really what is bringing you into my space. And then we go from there and we develop a path for you from there. And that's where I can give you my biggest strength, is how I'm feeling as I listen to you and your story. And so it would be 4 weeks, a live call per week. There may be some practices that I would ask you to do in between time to continue to help move that energy into a more grounded healing state. And it's an investment of $84.99. And, I mentioned this last week. Some people are like, why $84.99? It seems kind of like a weird number. I don't know. You know what? It's a number that popped in my mind and it felt good in my heart. And I want it to be accessible for everybody. So I like that number better. I don't know. I just like that number better. I don't always need to know why. I just know that it is. So there's that. And now let's get started. So this week I wanted to really kind of touch base on, and this is a deep subject. So we're just going to really just scratch the surface here because there's so much more to this. I'm trying to get my notes to work the way I want them, and they're not working the way I want them because sometimes I don't remember everything. So I make notes. Okay, so here we go. It's about self-judgment. Why are we so hard on ourselves? And I think we all probably have stories around this, our own stories, and you can call it, stories in your mind that's going on repeat. It's also can be very critical. Our inner critic's greatest hits, if you will, that voice, that conversation that goes on in your head on rinse and repeat. And it's like, oh, please just stop. And why is this happening? And how do I make that voice not so loud or not so critical? How do I stop being so hard on myself? And that's your harsh inner voice, that mind that comes in that says, you want to try this new event, you want to go on this new vacation, and you're all excited and you said yes. And when the time comes to go on the vacation, you're like, no, nope, it's going to be too much. It's an unknown place. I'm not going to be comfortable. There's just a lot of fear around this. And why am I always so afraid? And I don't need to go on a vacation. I'm just fine. Those are just, I don't know, some phrases that I think could come up for you in certain situations. And maybe it's around a new job of, I don't know as much as everybody else does. I feel really inadequate and like I don't belong in this job. And there's another instance. Or maybe how other people are talking to you of, they're very critical of you and how you are. And then you start to think about those words, those phrases that people are telling you of, why are you acting like this? Why are you talking like this? This is not acceptable. That was a big one for me. this is not acceptable. And then I started thinking about this. A friend of mine told me this phrase months ago. She's like, is that so? Something to consider of how people react to you and maybe some of the words that they say to you or phrases or conversations that in your body's not quite right. And just a simple, non-judgmental, fairly neutral comeback of, is that so? And there's times I've actually used, and who says so? So those are just some of mine. When people, have conversations with me during the day that, okay, they're not pleasant. And for me not to go down that harsh inner critic of, okay, well, maybe I need to be more like them. And why can't I do this? And why don't I look and feel like everybody else? Well, you know what? We really don't know what everybody else is feeling on the inside and the stories that they're telling themselves. What's more important is not what is going on the outside. It's what's going on the inside with you, with me, with all of us. The external creeps in there, doesn't it? And we hear all these stories on social media, on the news. I'm not a big news fan or political, and I'm not going down that road at all. But I can see just from observing people around me where they start to ask those questions of themselves because maybe they heard a conversation on the news or a podcast. But we get so down on ourselves. It could be, something maybe like our weight or the amount of money we earn, or maybe the amount of money we don't earn, and we don't feel good enough. And that little inner critic can really pop in there hard and heavy. And it's like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. So why can't we do this? And why don't we want to do this? I mean, that inner critic, that voice, honestly, truly, if it's not over a job or maybe friends or a community or something, that's going on at work for you, there's always going to be that voice there that's just never satisfied. And it just keeps on poking and poking and poking. And it can be so, so loud. And then it can be very, very sneaky. And it just kind of works its way back into certain things. Like, what's a good one? I know there for a long time, like my inner child, when I pictured my inner child, even like 3, 4 years ago, she was sad. She was kind of mopey and ho hum and just not a happy little girl. And about a year ago, someone asked me this one question, and it was at the right exact time. And she's like, okay, Terry, you've forgiven everybody else around you, but did you forgive yourself? And it was like, wow. And I had to stop and think about it. And you know what? I hadn't. And that is actually a very good example of the inner critic, not as being so loud and subtle all at the same time, to where you are finding fault with just about everything you're doing. And through subtle little stories, subtle little thoughts, and some big stories and some really loud thoughts. But it is that inner critic, and it can wear us down and we get tired. And sometimes we just say, okay, that's just how it is. Now, I personally don't believe that is just how it is. Every part of my body says no, no, no. And I've taken a lot of time, gone through a lot of healing to find out that that inner critic can be silenced, can be calmed down, and it's how we approach it. And a lot of times what the inner critic really is doing, as loud as those stories get and as low of an energy as that can give us within our bodies, that voice really is those stories. And we've talked about this here and there, of the mind is creating, the inner critic is creating to protect us, not to go do the something that's kind of new and scary. And it finds every reason in the world and will tell you every reason under the sun of why you can't do this. I challenge you to do it. Do it, because we can move through the inner critic. We can tell that inner critic, you know what? No, that's not true. That's not who I am. Yes, a part of me does have some fear over this big thing I want to do, but I'm going to do it anyway and I'm going to be okay. And you do the thing and you find at the end of it, there really wasn't anything to fear. Not really. You're safe. You're okay. And we got through it. We got through it. I use a lot of times as an example, this podcast. I found every reason in the world not to start this podcast over a year ago. I had such fear that I would not be able to do this. And I told myself all kinds of reasons of why I couldn't, that people won't hear me. They won't want to hear what I have to say, that what I have to say isn't important. I ramble sometimes. I trip over my words and sometimes I can't bring the point home. And here was another big one. And I still hear this still a lot sometimes, and I'm still working on this one, is okay, Terry, you say all the things and people don't understand what you're saying because you're not explaining it well enough. You're not using your words well enough. And that's a struggle I've had for many, many, many years. And I continue to work on it and it gets better and better every day. But that inner critic of all the reasons of why I can't or couldn't do the podcast or why I couldn't go on the latest trip that I went on a few months ago because there was fear. What if I got lost in the airport? What if I missed my connection? What if? But I did it. And when I stepped into it and I noticed this more and more as I face my fears of things that it's like, boy, this is something new. And wow, I don't know. As I move through it, I take deep breaths before I start. I exhale, long exhales. Sometimes I do some tapping and sometimes I do some walking outside. But where I'm going with this is when I start the thing and as I move through it, I am calm and I move through it to the other side. And I learned something about myself that I am stronger than I thought I was at the beginning. So each time I do this and overcome that fear, that inner critic is telling me I can't do this because I'm finding out I really can. And I can break that self judgment cycle that why I'm so hard on myself. And are you doing the same thing? Maybe I can't answer that question. Only you can. But how are you interacting with your inner critic, with the stories your mind is telling you? And that is, for me, it was holding me back of where I wanted to go. Are those stories holding you back in order to try and keep you safe from the unknown? And that's how I look at it. The stories that come in is based on history of what we've been through, and where you want to go is the unknown. And it's trying to keep you safe within the space it already has the space the mind already knows based on the experiences we have already had. So the unknown, that's where it can get a little scary. But when you move through the thing, that inner critic, I've noticed, dims down. It's not so harsh. It's not so loud. It's not so judgmental because we're hard on ourselves. And then I also have to ask where that criticism, that internal criticism came from. And a lot of times I can trace it back to younger times in my childhood. Everything had to be perfect. It had to be just so. And if it wasn't, like homework, and I had the worst time sometimes with homework and family trying to help me with my homework because I didn't understand how they were presenting it. And I would get frustrated and I would cry. Then I would get in trouble for crying. And it was a whole cycle. So there's a lot of internal stuff at work I had to do around that. Maybe that's part of your story. How do we reframe? How do we reframe those stories that our inner critic is telling us of why we can't do something? Maybe one of them is, hey, you know what? I'm curious about this. I want to see what happens if I do this. And maybe I don't know, maybe it's doing something so different you've never done before. Kind of like, let's see, what's a good one? Last week I was off work and I decided I wanted to paint my kitchen cabinets. And I walked in, I picked the paint store thinking I was going to get a couple of colors, kind of had an idea of where I was going to go with it. And by the time I left, I had 3 colors, wishing I had 4. Anyway, I did the kitchen cabinets basically how I had envisioned. And as I finished them up, I had this image pop up in my head of let's take this a step further. Let's just take these kitchen cabinets and turn them into something really artsy. Nothing structured, nothing planned. Just go with what feels good. And I did. And I would venture to say there's probably not another kitchen cabinet that looks like these. And I'm okay with that. It's very light. I feel good about it, but I also had this story in my head of, okay, I'm going to do this, but if I go to sell the house, that means I'm going to have to go back through and paint all this stuff neutral so everyone can, have these beige colors. And then I stopped. It's like, and who says so? Who says I have to go back and repaint the cabinets if I ever sell the house? It was only me telling me that story. And I went even a little bit further. It's like, I'm not going to repaint anything until I want to, and not because I'm selling a house, because these colors, this pattern, how I designed this without designing it, just letting it go, whichever way it went per cabinet. So no two look alike. That's how I felt in the moment. That's how I feel now. And letting other people see my personality, my inner self. So I'm leaving the kitchen cabinets because I don't need to change a thing unless I feel like I want to because I'm changing again. So it's kind of like I don't know, around the bush story, maybe. I hope it makes some sense for you. But that practice of just letting the paint go however it went in whatever design, that was a very energy moving practice for me. And it was really good. So we can talk about, in the 4 weeks as we go through from week to week, what somatic practices can we bring in to help you move some of those energies out? Because that's really at the end of all of this, in many cases, the energy, the stories we have held within, our energy, our feelings, our energies, we didn't let them move out. We clamped them down, right? Because maybe a lot of them weren't happy feelings and we didn't want to feel that. So we put them in a box and we stuffed them down somewhere and we don't want to let them out. But when those stories keep coming up and up and up, that tells me and has told me I've got some work to do around this story and why am I feeling like this and where did this come from? So that's something to think about and to consider. And if you stop being curious about how to heal that inner critic, to heal that inner story, to help heal that self-judgment of yourself, what will happen? What are you afraid will happen? What is the worst thing that can happen? But ask this, what is the best thing that will happen? That you move the energy out, you feel lighter, you feel more of who you are. And that's how energies work. We start to move them out. And these traumas, these stories, these feelings we have held on to for so long in our lives. Let's start moving those out. And when new feelings come in from new experiences, let's recognize those and how we move those out. So it's evolution, I think is what I want to say here. It's an evolution and to be curious. So I'm going to end this a couple of ways. One, when you have these feelings and you have these stories come up and you have this self-judgment, this inner critic come up, can you remember this? Put your hand on your heart, put your hand on your stomach. I am here and I am enough. I am here and I am enough. Take some deep breaths, exhale deeply, and truly feel those words in your heart because you are enough. I am enough. So, I talked briefly at the beginning of the show about the 4 week program, and I'd like to end with a little bit, just bringing it home for you to consider, starting somewhere mid-August and, for 4 weeks. So if something in today's episode landed in with you, it really resonated with you, or you felt a tightness in your chest or your gut, a recognition of, or maybe it was that's me. I want to invite you into the 4 week program. It's a bit of an intensive where we work together one-on-one. And I'm opening up to a small number of people And it's not a course. There's nothing to watch. There's no homework. I may give you some somatic practices to practice in between the once a week live call with me to see what practice works best for you because not all practices work the same for everybody. So there would be that. And, like I said, one live call a week. The investment is $84.99 for the whole journey. So there's this you sometimes hear you were never broken, there's nothing to fix. And I'm very resistant to those words. So I apologize for saying them, but I'm saying them for a reason. We are all here on this earth at this time to learn something. And many times the experiences we hold and the stories we hold in our bodies and the feelings we have not let move through us, that's the work we're here to do. And then when we can do that, we help others do the same. So I'm going to leave you with that. And I will leave the link in the show notes to set up a call. And for the 4-week program or a call to ask about the 4-week program, I'll probably have the link for the sign up again more towards the beginning of August when I don't know, actually set a date for it to start. So anyway, if you have any questions, send me an email. If you are watching this on YouTube, comment below and I will reply. It would mean a great deal if you liked the show, you shared it so we can get the word out to everybody who needs to hear it. And that's the most important thing. So I wish you all a great week. I would love to hear from you and we'll talk soon.